it kind of took me a minute to establish myself as an elite athlete. And once I hit that point, I was like, okay, I think I'm in a space now where I've accomplished enough things and kind of solidified myself as somebody who may be dealing with all this anxiety and all this stuff, but at the end of the day is still able to go perform at a high level. She's able to make teams. She's able to be in the NCAA finals. You know, I think once I hit that point and felt like I had accomplished enough, then I could start opening up about what was going on, and people would take me seriously about it and see that it doesn't necessarily have to stop you from accomplishing the things that you want to accomplish.
Welcome to Tad Voices. I'm Nick.
And I'm Lawson. And we're friends and former teammates who are here to talk about mental health.
We are by no means experts in this field, nor is this a substitute for professional help, but we can promise open and vulnerable conversations that highlight the strength of some amazing people who have decided to share their story with us.
Talk, share, help. And thanks for listening.
Today, we are excited to welcome to the podcast Kendall Ellis. Kendall is currently a professional runner and a New Balance athlete after graduating from USC in 2018. At USC, she helped her team win the program's second national championship after an incredible come-from-behind win in the 4x400 meter relay. She is a 14-time Division I All-American, a 7-time Pac-12 conference champion, holds NCAA records in the 400 meter and 4x400 relay. Athletic accomplishments aside, Kendall has been an advocate and a role model for so many young female athletes and has been incredibly open about her mental health journey through high school and college. We are so excited to chat with you. Welcome to the podcast, Kendall Ellis.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. Like Nick said, how are you doing personally? What have you been up to lately?
Yeah, I'm at my former college, University of Southern California, and I'm in the middle of prepping for the Olympics, now postponed to 2021, but getting ready for that. I'm currently getting my MBA. I have one class left to finish before I get that degree, so I'm really excited about that. And I also just joined an organization called Voice in Sport that mentors young female athletes, so that's been really cool for me. And that's all that's going on in my life right now.
It certainly sounds like you're keeping busy, but I think the one thing that I really wanted to talk just a little bit about before we get into the mental health conversation a little bit more, and I'm sure for anybody who's listening initially, a quick Google search, you can pull up quite a few videos, but there's one that I just watched today actually that really stands out in my mind, and that would be one of your comebacks. And I'm sure you know the one that I'm talking about, but I just kind of I was just so impressed and enthralled watching it, and I just want to know whenever you got the baton in that situation, what was your mindset like? Because that's honestly one of the more impressive comebacks that I've seen in a very long time.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I get that question a lot. And honestly and truly, it was just, I had lost the open 400 earlier that day. So I was like, okay, I'm a senior. It's my last time to represent USC on the track. It's my last time running here as a collegiate athlete. I want to go out a champion. I want to go out a winner. And whatever it takes for me to do that is what I'm going to do. So that was honestly and truly just the mindset of, we're not going out like that.
That's awesome to hear. And obviously, congratulations. And you've gone on to do some incredible things, both athletically and away from the track. But sort of, without further ado, we'd love to, ask you to share with us and our listeners sort of your mental health journey, which you've been so open about, and, take us through your experiences a little bit.
Yeah, I've been running track since I was 7 years old, and I don't think there's ever been a competition where I didn't have some sort of nerves. It's just kind of how I'm built. I always want to do well. I want to be the best at something. And that's how I approach track and field as well, even from a young age. So I can remember going to track meets as a little kid and getting super nervous before my races. I would be really quiet and just so anxious about the race that was about to happen. And for me, I just assumed that was normal because that was my normal as far as I was concerned. And it wasn't until I kind of got to high school where it was just so extreme. It started taking away from my performance because I'm sitting here having so much emotional turmoil that it's taking a toll on me physically. And my high school coach was the one who kind of pointed it out. I remember my either junior or senior year of high school, he sat down with my parents and myself and was like, okay, like we need to get you help because this is not healthy. You are having panic attacks before meets, you're throwing up, you're shaking. It's just this whole production in a sense. And it's taking away from your performance. Like, I know you're capable of so much, you're performing well, but you can do so much more and you can be so much better. So it was definitely my high school coach who encouraged/forced me to seek a sports therapist. And that's where it all started.
Great. And I think it's probably a pretty important realization because obviously there's, just as a competitive athlete, you kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but there's that innate kind of maybe not necessarily anxiety, but there's that nervousness, right? And you want to do well, and in some ways, I think that can drive a lot of people. But there are definitely, in terms of yourself specifically, times when that can become a little bit overbearing. So maybe if you could just kind of dive into that a little bit, and was there a certain instance that you noticed or a certain meet where you're just like, this isn't necessarily normal. Like I shouldn't be having these panic attacks. It's not just, I guess, a normal kind of athletic experience.
Right. I think for me, it was the fact that the state championship could be 4 or 5 months away, and I could start thinking about it and start getting worked up and having a whole anxiety attack about it. And it wouldn't be for 5 months. We weren't even close to state championships. It was far in the distance and many more meets to come before that one. And I could already be in panic mode about it. I realized that was an issue, and I didn't notice performance-wise until it came to, in track and field in high school, you compete within your state for the most part. So I was competing within the state of Florida. I had won every state championship. So I was good as far as I was concerned. I was like, okay, I'm good. But over the summer, when I would go compete at New Balance Nationals or any other kind of national meet, that's where I would crack. And it's like, okay, you were running these times at meets in Florida against competition that you were constantly seeing. But now when it comes to a bigger stage, you fall apart every single time consistently. So that's when I think my coach was like, okay, like enough. I'm not gonna see this happen to you. I don't want it to happen to you. I want you to be the best that you can be and reach your full abilities. And this mental roadblock is definitely in the way of that.
Now, after you competed, was there any residual anxiety or residual stress that you would have to deal with?
That's a really good question. I don't think so. Off the top of my head, honestly, I don't think so. For me, it was all the pre-race nerves. Once I finished the race, what's done is done. It's over. I'm not really thinking about it, and it's probably out of my head until the next race comes up. So after the fact, it's over and done with. I can relax. I can breathe because I've done all that I could do at that point.
Yeah. So I guess the follow-up question for me would be, what was the best way? You talk about your coach sort of as your support system who identified that, like, hey, we could be healthier in these situations. We can maximize your potential. We could maximize your daily life by combating some of these feelings, these thoughts. What were the best ways that you handled your feelings, your emotions, your anxiety, and did counseling or therapy play a role in it?
Absolutely. I absolutely love my sports therapist. I have had the same one since being introduced in high school. And I can say our first interaction, I think our first like 4 meetings, I don't think I said a word. I did not speak because I was in denial, and I was like, he can't help me. There's nothing wrong with me. Like, I don't want to be here. I had, the kind of negative stigma that surrounds mental health. And at that point, that's how I was feeling. I don't want people to think I was crazy. I didn't want to accept that. Even if there wasn't something necessarily quote unquote wrong, that working on your mental health is just, it's a bonus. It's something to add, to bring to the game, So for me, my sports therapist has made all the difference. I always say I still have a ways to go, and, no one's perfect. So I don't ever think I'll have the mental game 100% on lock, but the mechanisms and like coping therapies that he's given me have definitely helped me. I think some of my favorite are visualization. That's a really, really big one for me, down to the point where I will play old races just to hear like the crowd and the introduction, kind of get a feel for, okay, this is what it's going to be like next week. So let's go ahead and start getting in the mindset and then trick our brains to think we've already done this before.
Have you noticed that like some of these tactics also translate just kind of into your daily life as well, kind of outside of track and field? Or I guess potentially like, do you use any of them kind of on a daily basis?
Yeah, I do. Some of my breathing techniques, even in, sometimes practice is honestly and truly harder than me sometimes. So I do a lot of breathing techniques when it comes to practice and certain workouts that I know are challenging and kind of get me some days. So definitely implement them at practice. And even when it comes to school, I'm a little bit of a nervous test taker, because anything that I know that I am good at, I want to be able to live up to that expectation. So when it comes to tests, like school is my thing. I love school. So even when it comes to tests, sometimes I'll do like my pre-breathing exercises to kind of calm the anxiety and just focus on the task at hand.
Now, for somebody who is looking from the outside in on your sort of situation, Kendall Ellis, accomplished athlete, scholarship athlete, I assume, does really well in school, about to have her MBA, future Olympian. Sort of, the stigma around mental health would suggest like, oh, I can't, like, she's perfect, right? How would you, like, have you had that interaction with somebody where they're like, they downplay the fact that, everybody's human, and these thoughts and feelings are completely normal, but sort of the stigma around mental health is like, how can somebody like that who on the outside looks, unfazed, but daily sort of has these feelings and needs to work on their mental health, right? Like, nobody has a perfect mental health. Have you had the people suggest that you're not feeling what you actually are?
Honestly, I think for me, no one's ever kind of said it to me directly, but I think for the general public, like outside looking in, I think it's a matter of talking about it. I'm very open about it. I'm not ashamed about it. It is what it is, and we're working on it. So I think people kind of get the idea, just because I'm not afraid to discuss it.
Yeah, and I think that's really valuable information for a lot of our listeners. I'm just kind of wondering, and you've spoken to therapy a little bit. What was your support system kind of like? Was that an intermediary step before seeking out therapy, or how did family and friends, kind of help support you during these times?
Mm-hmm. I think my parents, of course, they love me, and they were always as supportive as they could be, and trying to do as much as they could, whether it be like talking to me before meets and like asking me how I'm feeling and, kind of just doing their best to make their daughter comfortable, because no parent wants to see their child over here in tears before a competition. I'm sure it was hard on them to watch me go through that week after week and them not being able to do anything about it. I can say my teammates in college were definitely very helpful. Whether it was me just asking if I could talk to them beforehand or just go hang out in their room to kind of calm myself down and be around friends. Whether it would be before I go out onto the track, a last minute like hug and like, you got this, and just reassurance. I think the people who I surround myself with have always been very, very supportive of me and making sure that I'm as good as I can be.
Yeah, and you talk about, being very open about it. How long did it take you before you were able to be open about it? So, I think you said in high school you originally started seeing your sports psychologist. Is that correct?
Right.
So, were you always like, you know what, this is normal, people should be working on their mental health, or did you sort of have to get to a point where you're like, you know what, like, I'm not going to let this bother me anymore. Like, people should go work on it. Right. And get rid of that stigma. Did it take you a little bit of time to become open about, what you were feeling? Even if people saw it, but they didn't know sort of how you were working on it?
Right. I think it took me a minute. Especially because I think I just kind of felt like I had to be in a place to be able to speak on it. And by that, I just mean, I had my high school accolades, but I think in college, it kind of took me a minute to establish myself as an elite athlete. And once I hit that point, I was like, okay, I think I'm in a space now where I've accomplished enough things and kind of solidified myself as somebody who may be dealing with all this anxiety and all this stuff, but at the end of the day is still able to go perform at a high level. She's able to make teams. She's able to be in the NCAA finals. I think once I hit that point and felt like I had accomplished enough, then I could start opening up about what was going on. People would take me seriously about it and see that it doesn't necessarily have to stop you from accomplishing the things that you want to accomplish.
Yeah, and I definitely think, as a high performing athlete, your accolades definitely speak for themselves. But oftentimes, I think, whether it be in athletics or the workplace or at school, it's easier. When things are going well, I think it's easier to kind of tune into how we're feeling and accept those thoughts. But I think it's sometimes, when things aren't going well and you feel like you've kind of checked all the boxes, you've done all the right things, and you have this one roadblock or this failure, and I can only imagine as a high profile athlete, sometimes those can be magnified. And I'm sure there's at points you feel quite a bit of pressure. So I was maybe just wondering if you kind of like walk us through how, after a potential failure or something of that nature, you kind of allow yourself to bounce back or feel your emotions surrounding those times.
Yeah. Let's see. Let me think for a sec. I think, okay, 2017 World Championships were in London. And I remember going into trials. My goal was kind of just to get in on the relay. I was a junior in college. So I was like, okay, it's the first senior USA team we're going out for. If I just get in and I make it on the relay, I've done more than enough. Like, I made the team. And that was kind of my mindset going in. And I remember meeting with coach round after round. He told me, just run each round like you're trying to win. If you run each round like you're trying to be number one, you will make this team. And I trust my coach with my life. So I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. Did that every round. I ended up placing third, and I made the team in the individual 400. And that was not my plan. That is not what I thought was going to happen, but it did. So with that being said, went to London for the Open 400. I was one of the younger people on the team. It was my first world team, first USA senior team. And I remember feeling so overwhelmed by the amount of pressure I was putting on myself. No one put it there but me. And I had like an entire breakdown before one of the rounds. And it took such a toll on me emotionally and physically because I just couldn't handle it. Truth be told, I could not handle the pressure. And I went out there. I ran the slowest time I had ran all season. It was a time I hadn't seen forever. It was slow. It was embarrassing and didn't make it past the first round. And I just remember feeling so defeated and embarrassed. It was just an embarrassing moment for me. And, went home after all that and was just really down on myself because you sat here and you did that on your first team. Like, it's a terrible way to represent yourself, terrible way to represent your coaches, your school. And I remember promising myself at that point that I would never experience that feeling again because it was just the worst feeling in the world. And, went back to SE, went back to school 2018 and ended up winning indoor nationals, ended up having an incredible relay comeback and one of my best seasons on the track. And that 2017 moment was constantly in my mind every day at practice because I was like, we're not going to feel that way ever again. We'll do whatever we need to do to make sure that doesn't happen.
Where do you think confidence and sort of expectations, like, that's a pretty fine line where like you're confident going into something, it could be, a test, a competition, an interview versus like this pressure that you put on yourself. Like, have you thought about it that way where it's sort of like in order to maximize my, my performance, I want to be confident. I want to have high expectations for myself, but I want to stay away from the pressure aspect. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, how do you manage sort of those three aspects if you're at your best?
Right. That's a good question. Because it really is such a fine line. I think for me, my coaches, I'm really, really blessed with the coaches that I have, and they don't ever place pressure on me. There's never any pressure placed. My parents have never placed pressure on me. The second I don't want to be involved in this sport anymore, I have their full support. I think when it comes to confidence, a lot of mine comes from practice. I've started approaching practice differently than I have in my first few years of track and field. And now it's like, if you're going to die, practice is the place to do it. Let's not die in a meet. But if we're going to die, let's do it at practice. So give your all and simulate what it should be like at a meet, and that'll shine through. So for me, I think it's just kind of reminding myself that this is an opportunity. This is something that we get to do, not something I have to do. It should be fun. It should be something you enjoy. At the end of the day, it's you're doing this sport because you love it, not because you feel like you have to or it's some sort of obligation. So keeping all those things in mind, I think, are super helpful. And there's a quote that I really like. I think it's by Billie Jean King, and it goes something like, "Pressure is a privilege, and I'm privileged to be pressured." So kind of reminding yourself that it's an honor. It's an honor to feel this way, and it's an honor to feel like you are so good and that you want to reach your maximum potential.
I love that. I don't think I heard that one before, but I do love that quote. And I really appreciate you kind of diving a little bit deeper into the mindset of a very elite athlete. But I think one important point that you brought up, and this I'm sure that young athletes or non-athletes alike can benefit from, and it's to not let your past failures kind of define you, right? And oftentimes you can use those as motivation. But I think another thing I'd just like to ask, and I know we'll probably wrap it up soon here, but do you have any advice that you'd give to younger athletes that may be kind of experiencing some similar anxieties that you were surrounding your sport?
Yeah. Um, it sounds super cliche, but I say it all the time, and I wish I had taken it. Just kind of like an oxymoron. I wish I had taken it more seriously when I was younger, and I wish I had fun. Um, I think I was just looking at it as such a business, and like just not for the fun in the sense that sport has. It was just taken way too seriously as like a 12-year-old, And I think for me, if you genuinely love the sport and have fun doing what you're doing, take the pressure off. Don't look at it as some terrible, menacing thing that you have to do. Really and truly look at it as an opportunity and something that you get to have fun with, because I know I've definitely robbed myself of so many enjoyable moments with teammates and friends and coaches because I was just so caught up in my own anxiety.
I love that, and I think that that's a great piece of advice for anything, is be present, right, and not obviously have goals and aspirations of where you want to go, but also be present and understand that we're thankful of being where we are in this moment, and whether it's at practice with your friends or studying for an exam or anything like that. Like I love the pressure quote of we're lucky to be in these situations and take full advantage of them, but also be present and know that it doesn't matter what other people think of us. It's just about how we prepare and how we present ourselves, and if we can lay our head on the pillow at the end of the day and be proud of that and be happy about it. I think that goes a long way, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Being present is definitely something I've had to work on, just being grounded and realizing this is where we are right now. So let's not worry about the past. Let's worry about the future. Let's be where our feet are.
Definitely. And I think the way we usually like to wrap this up, and to close, I just wanted to ask, kind of looking back and taking your experiences into account, what does mental well-being or physical well-being look like to you?
Mental well-being looks like to me is being aware of the way you're feeling and then taking steps to correct it. I think I've gotten better at like knowing my triggers and being very, very self-aware of how I'm feeling. And then not just sitting in those feelings, but actively doing something to change that.
That's awesome to hear. And I think, again, that self-awareness piece is huge. And, we want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us tonight. And, from all of us at TAD, best of luck in the Olympics and in the next year of training. And we know you'll do great things. And thanks again for taking the time to chat with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.